have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga obarta, stand and fight. Purport. The yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga, or eternal activities performed by the living entity. This yoga has two divisions of sacrificial actions. One is called sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self, which is pure spiritual activity. If sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, the translation, did you read it? Go ahead. Purport again. The yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga, or eternal activities performed by the living entity. This yoga has two divisions of sacrificial actions. One is called sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self, which is pure spiritual activity. If sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, then such sacrifice becomes material. But one who performs such sacrifices with a spiritual objective or in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. When we come to spiritual activities, we find that these are also divided into two, namely, understanding of one's own self or one's constitutional position, and the truth regarding the Supreme Personality of God. One who follows the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is can very easily understand these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. For him, there is no difficulty in obtaining perfect knowledge of the self as part and parcel of the Lord. And such understanding is beneficial, for such a person can easily understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. In the beginning of this chapter, the transcendental activities of the Lord were discussed by the Supreme Lord himself. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless, and is to be considered to be misusing the fragmental independence awarded to him by the Lord. In spite of such instructions, one who does not understand the real nature of the Lord as the eternal, blissful, all-knowing personality of Godhead is certainly fool number one. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is awakened by different types of sacrifices to the demigod, sacrifice to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, in household life, in controlling the senses, in practicing mystic yoga, in penance, in foregoing material possessions, in studying the Vedas, and in partaking of the social institution called Varnashram Dharma. All of these are known as sacrifice, and all of them are based on regulated action. But within all of these activities, the important factor is self-realization. One who seeks that objective is the real student of Bhagavad Gita. But one who doubts the authority of Krishna falls back. One is therefore advised to study Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture under a bona fide spiritual master with service and surrender. A bona fide spiritual master is in the disciplic succession from time eternal, and he does not deviate at all from the instructions of the Supreme Lord as they were imparted millions of years ago to the Sun God, from whom the instructions of Bhagavad Gita have come down to the earthly kingdom. One should therefore follow the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is expressed in the Gita itself, and beware of self-interested people after personal aggrandizement who deviate others from the actual path. The Lord is definitely the Supreme Person, and his activities are transcendental. One who understands this is a liberated person from the very beginning of his study of Bhagavad Gita. Tasmad ajnana sambhutam kritstam jnana sinnatim hitstam gyanasinat chitvainam samshayam yogam atishto vard. Therefore the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. So, Srila Prabhupada has given us this purport, a summary description of this 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The yoga described in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga. Sanatana means eternal. We are performing the activity of Sanatana Dharma when we are doing Krishna consciousness. We follow Sanatana Dharma. That means we are following the eternal constitutional activities of the living entity. Varnashram Dharma is simply a department of Sanatana Dharma, the spiritual sky. They perform Sanatana Dharma as well. Varnashram Dharma is required here in the material world because people have material bodies and material desires. But still, Krishna has given us this Varnashram Dharma in order that we may organize the society around the social requirements in the material world, yet aim the society to achieve perfection back home, going by having the living entities go back home, back to Godhead at the end. So, Varnashram Dharma is nothing but Sanatana Dharma, but it is now adjusted for this material world so that we may utilize our activity according to our own natures in making progressive advancement in spiritual life while taking care of the material necessities. But actually what we are doing here in Krishna Consciousness Movement is the activities of Sanatana Dharma, the eternal activities which are accepted by the spirit soul in relationship with the Supreme. Now, the Sanatana Yoga is a yoga process which is related with the eternal occupational duties of the living entities. And as Prabhupada says here, this yoga has 2 divisions of sacrificial actions. One is the sacrifice of one's material possessions. This is like kind of karma yoga. The sacrificing of one's results is also the sacrifice of a material possession, because once you achieve a result, it's yours. So when you are sacrificing this in the fire of yajna, worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that's the sacrifice of material possessions. But you are sacrificing also the next platform, knowledge. This, of course, does not mean you give up your knowledge. It means you get knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is sacrifice of knowledge. By gaining knowledge of Krishna, you will be engaged in the sacrifice of knowledge. And that sacrificial performance, in other words, the gaining of knowledge, is divided into 2 again. The knowledge of the living entity and knowledge of the Supreme. Actually, to have only one and not the other is not sufficient. If you only know the Supreme and you don't know the living entity, then you may be a monist, thinking it's all one. And if you don't know the Supreme and you only know the living entity, you may also be like that monist, thinking that the living entity is the Supreme. One has to know both things, the Supreme and the living entity, simultaneously. One has to know the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the source of the living entity, and the living entity is the servant of the Supreme. Together, this is self-realization. Try to understand the self without understanding the Supreme is incomplete realization. Therefore, we say the Mayavadis, their understanding is incomplete because they understand only a portion of the absolute truth. They understand either the self or they understand the Supreme. In either case, they don't understand that there are two. They either turn the self into the Supreme or the Supreme is the all one. They never make any distinction between any living entities and the Supreme. But the whole word yoga implies two. The very word in Sanskrit, yoga, implies the existence of two living entities, at least, because yoga means to link. To link with something means you have one thing which links with another thing. You cannot link with yourself. There's no question of linking with oneself. He's already linked with oneself. Linking means you link with something else. So, when one performs the yoga process and links with the Supreme, then this automatically implies two. Yoga, the very word yoga, means two. Minimum. So, when one performs sacrifice with material objectives, this is not Sanatana Yoga. Because sacrificing of one's possessions can also go on in the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. The Karma Kanda process. This means that I will sacrifice possessions and I will get results which will get me more possessions. Or they'll get me better possessions. Or better position. In other words, I'm giving only because in the future I'll be getting. One Karmakandya understanding never gives unless he's going to get. He's a businessman. He makes business with the Supreme. I offer you so much sacrifice. You offer me so much elevation. And were you to find out that he would not get the elevation, then all the sacrifices would stop. Now Krishna, he's a little different in how he deals with his devotees than the demigods are, for instance. For instance, Lord Shiva could grant you all kinds of benedictions, whatever you like. And those benedictions would be granted to you without any consideration of how it would benefit you or harm you. You would simply get these blessings and benedictions. That's his thing. Lord Shiva doesn't consider you are the way you are going to suffer or enjoy these benedictions later on. He just gives you what you want. Most demigods do like that. But Krishna, he considers whether this benediction which is going to be given to you is beneficial to you. After all, Krishna is no fool. He's not going to give you a blessing or a benediction which is going to cause you to either, number one, ask for it again, or number two, cause you to be dragged down off of the platform of devotion. If Krishna gives you benediction which you're simply going to ask for again, then this is going to start an endless cycle of begging. Then one's so-called prayers simply turn into a begging business. Oh, give me this, give me that, give me the other thing. And one starts praying to God as if he was the order supplier. He was the one who should simply give us so many things. Some followers of certain religions even have gimme prayers, where they say, give me days, give me bread, don't give me any bad associations that lead me into various sinful activities. And if you do, then forgive me. We call this the gimme prayer. Just give me this, give me that, give me the other thing. And don't make me fall down. And if you do, forgive me. So, this is alright. That's called pious as well. That is also a form of piety. It is a form of piety to ask the Lord for material things. Just like, for instance, we have the example of Kardama Muni in the 3rd canto of Bhagavatam, if you ever get to read it. So, in this 3rd canto of Bhagavatam, we find Kardama Muni was a very great mystic yogi. He was meditating for 60,000 years. Of course, in the Satya Yuga, where people's duration of life is 100,000 of years, this was possible. But even in the Satya Yuga, it was generally seen people would maybe meditate 10,000, 20,000. If they were really advanced, 40,000. Kardama Muni meditated for 60,000 of years and developed such mystic potency that he could create a palace in the sky which was 7 stories high, just by his mystic power, filled with jewels and gems and valuable diamonds and gold and coral and emeralds and all things. By his mystic power. Of course, nowadays we have no experience of mystic yogis at all, and maybe there are some 1 or 2 or 4 in India, but they're busy producing some ashes in their hands or something like that. Not very spectacular mystic yogi. But we are talking about millions and millions of years ago. And in fact, we're not created. Swayambhuva Manu was the Manu. And in the very beginning of this time, in Satya Yuga, there was Kardama Muni. Kardama Muni was meditating like this. So, as Kardama was meditating, he had not taken a vow to be Naistika Brahmachari. The Naistika Brahmachari is one who never gets married, never engaged in household life. So, Kardama did not take that vow. And while he was meditating, he had the desire in his heart to get married to a proper girl and to produce one super excellent Krishna conscious child and then renounce everything and go back to God. Now, one may ask, what does this Mr. Yogi have wanting to produce one Krishna conscious child? Well, the answer is very simple. In this case, that one Krishna conscious child was Lord Kapila, the incarnation of God. So, Kapila Muni's desire was inspired by the Supreme Lord, because the Supreme Lord would take birth as the son, and then teach his mother, Devahuti, all of the principles of the Sankhya Yoga process, and that she would become equally qualified like her husband, and follow her husband in spiritual protection. So, we find that the mystic process is available to anybody. And when this mystic process is available to anybody. And when this cardinal was performing this process, he was thinking, I wish to get a child. I wish to get a first-class wife, get a child who's expert at this Krishna consciousness. In other words, an incarnation of the Lord. So, Krishna came before him, and Kardama willingly stated that he had this desire. Now one may ask, why he worshipped Krishna to satisfy his desire? Because after all, he possesses not to worship the goddess Uma. Goddess Uma worship Parvati. When one worships the goddess Uma, then goddess Uma can give one everything in regard to his wife. Then the goddess can give his wife, no problem. It's like the girl could worship Kachayayan, then the goddess could get a good husband. Little boys, they can worship goddess Uma and get a good wife. So there was no need, from the external point of view, to worship Krishna. But it is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Akam Sarvakam Mugam Okshikam Uddharmi Vipena Bhakti Yogena Yudeta Purushottanam. That one who is topmost class of man, or if one wants to become a topmost class of man, he simply should worship Krishna. If he has all desire, no desire, or desire of liberation, the one to worship is Krishna alone, for he is the supreme satisfier of all our desires. Therefore, Pradama just simply worshiped Krishna, because he knew that all of the demigods were included within Krishna. He says, after all, I am the source of all the demigods. And further he says, those whose minds are twisted by lusty desires, they worship the demigods for material benediction, and they're interested in the business activity, where you give something to the demigod, and the demigod accepts that, and becomes pleased with you, and then he gives something to you. But we are interested in pure devotion. Therefore, we serve Krishna in all circumstances. That is not to say that we may be devoid of all desires. First of all, nobody can be devoid of all desires. Everybody has desire. Maybe somebody has no desire much, but some desire must be there. The Buddhists try to make themselves devoid of all desire, but that's also a desire. Therefore, you can't avoid it. So, desire is always there. But even one wants to have no desire. It's better he serves Krishna. That's real desirelessness. Desirelessness means you have no material. You are not desiring a material thing. You simply want to satisfy desirelessness. Because one who knows what is true to know that if you satisfy Krishna, then all desires are satisfied. All desires are fulfilled. However, not those desires which are destructive to your Krishna consciousness, as you mentioned before. Krishna will never satisfy a desire which will harm you. We are so foolish. We will ask for so many. It's like a devotee may ask, this, and that, and this. And Krishna knows, if I give him all these things, then he'll fall down. Therefore, I better not give him. Instead, I will take away everything he has and replace that with my lotus feet. And in this way, he'll have to surrender, and then he'll really be happy. And that will fulfill all his desires. So therefore, sometimes, when somebody is a little bit opulent or well situated in the material world, Krishna blesses him by taking everything away. Not all the time, but in some cases. Yasyaham Abraham Ibrahim Sapulanshana. Prabhupada used to quote this verse all the time, but in his case, it's just what Krishna did. Although he had a quite successful chemical firm, and he was very nicely taking care of all of his family responsibilities, he had a desire to follow the instructions of his spiritual master, Sri Krishna, and to serve by Krishna mission. And Krishna knew that. But Prabhupada was not irresponsible. He would not just throw away his whole family life like that. He had to take care of all and try to make a Krishna conscious, but they were not very eager. His family was not very eager to become. Although by modern standards, they were very Krishna conscious. But according to his standards, they were not so Krishna conscious. So, at that time, Krishna very mercifully arranged it so that his business started to fail by some treachery. Somebody made some treachery. Conspiracy was there between his company and another big company. So he brought it out, and his finances were going very bad due to this arrangement. And in fact, his business started to fall apart. But somehow or another he was keeping it going, but it was getting harder and harder. But as it became harder to make money, the family members were becoming more and more upset. And saying, what is this? Why you can't make money? And in fact, his wife and his children moved to the house of the wife's father because they thought they couldn't be supplied money anymore. So, Prabhupada said that Krishna arranges it so that you lose your money. And when you lose your money, your family members, who you thought were your loving followers, start to reject you because they were only interested in the money you were giving. And then your friends reject you because who wants a friend who's poor? And your society rejects you because you're a failure with your friends and your family. So in this way, we find that Krishna arranges it so that you are rejected by material society. And this may seem to be very painful, but it is not painful for one who wants to surrender to the Supreme Personality of God and uses this opportunity to go back to the spiritual world, to surrender to the Supreme Lord. So, although we may consider it a great, horrible thing that friends and family and society reject us, actually that's Krishna's mercy. If one was too much attached, could not break free himself, Krishna helps him by cutting the bondage to the material nature. We see this also in the example of Narada Muni. Narada Muni, in his previous life, before this day of Brahma took place, was the son of a maidservant. And being the son of a maidservant, he was just a Sudra. So we don't find that Sudras generally achieve very great spiritual conditions, generally speaking. So, but Narada Muni, he was very lucky. His mother was serving great souls by taking care of their household needs when they were there during the Chaturmasya, the rainy season. They would not travel. They were staying in one spot. So his mother was acting as servant like that. But during that time, he could hear discussions of these great souls. But he was attached to his mother. Naturally, as all young boys would be attached to their mother. But Krishna arranged it that his mother was bitten by a snake and died at a very young age. So ordinarily this would be the greatest disaster for a child. To lose your mother at a very young age is the greatest disaster for a child. But not that child. He understood this immediately, see the mercy of the Supreme Personality of God himself, to cut the bondage of affection, which was holding him back in his spiritual realization. Of course, just compare Narada Muni's understanding of this with any ordinary child that would take birth nowadays. Very different. So, Narada Muni, being that he was special like this, Krishna would never do such things for ordinary person, or ordinary course of events. It's not a principle, but although karma is there, may happen. But in this case, it was specifically Krishna's mercy on him. And he immediately left that home because the great personalities had gone on their way after the rain season. And he went through the forest to meditate just as they had taught him. This was the mystic process. So he meditated in that way, and he very quickly
received the audience of the Supreme Court. Just once. In sound, but that was enough for his chance at realization. Then he became perfected in that way. So we find that there are many instances in our literatures, these are only two where a person was too much attached in his material existence, but had some sincerity to render service to the Supreme Lord. So the Lord arranged things in such a way that he would be detached by some events. And that those persons took advantage of that and surrendered. The most significant example in the Bhagavatam is Maharaj Parikshit himself. Maharaj Parikshit had unlimited opulence. When you're the king of the world, there is no limit to your opulence. You are taking tax from all over the whole world. And that's a lot of money. And you can do whatever you want with it. And he inherited the kingdom, already the most opulent kingdom of the Kuru dynasty. And there were no kings to oppose him because they were all dead. They'd been killed in the Battle of Kurukshetra. Therefore, his rule was supreme. And still, although he was a young man, although he had the most beautiful wife with him, although he had a very filled treasury, although he had many animals, means of transportation, warriors, his army, he had good advisors and brahmanas, and everything. But Krishna, in order to bless him, gave him that benediction that he would be cursed by this brown boy. In the beginning, Maharaj Parikshit had seen Krishna within the womb of his mother, saving him from the Brahmastra weapon of Ashvatthama. Ashvatthama had thrown a Brahmastra to finish off the last remaining child of the Pandavas. Ashvatthama was so envious. He wanted to make sure there were no descendants of the Pandavas after this battle took place. And Maharaj Parikshit was the last descendant. He was the son of Abhimanyu, who was the son of Arjuna. So he was the grandson of Arjuna, descendant of the Kuru dynasty, Pandavas. So Ashvatthama wanted to kill him and was succeeding in burning him with the Brahmastra weapon, but Krishna himself entered into the womb, and Maharaj Parikshit, although an embryo, could see the super soul swirling his club. And afterwards, he was always seeking that super soul again. Therefore, he got the name Parikshit. He's one who's always seeking. Seeker. So he was always looking for Krishna, even from the beginning of his life. He wanted to see again that beautiful form that he had saw as an embryo, which he never forgot. So Krishna enabled him to again attain that perfection of his realization by having him cursed by a Brahmin boy. 7 days he shall die. 7 days he shall die. So Maharaj Parikshit immediately got the impetus to give up everything and surrender and sit on the banks of the Ganges and listen to Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can understand how it was the Lord's mercy on him, that although he had such an opulent position, because he had some sincere desire in the heart, and immediately he could renounce everything when Krishna gave him the impetus by saying, you only have a very short time to live. Similarly, Maharaj Katvanga, he had only one muhurta left to live, 48 minutes, or something like that. Very short period of time. He had been fighting on the heavenly planets. He was the king of the earthly planets. But the demigods requested him to kindly come to the heavenly planets and help them in the fight against the demons. In the former age, in the Satyayuga and like that, the demigods and the personalities who lived on the earth planet, the very, very great personalities of the earth planet, were not that much different. And sometimes the demigods would take help of such great, powerful kings in order to defeat the demons in battle. So Maharaj Katvanga was called up there, You find also Muchukunda was called up there. There were other Raji and other kings called up there in order to help the demigods in their fight against the demons. So, Maharaj Katvanga fought very nicely and drove the demons away. So, the demigods offered him a benediction. He asked for the benediction that he wants to know how much longer he had duration of life. The demigod said, "You've got one muhurta more." So immediately left the heavenly planets and came back to the earth planet with all speed and immediately surrendered in the holy place and fixed his mind upon Krishna and left his body in that way, fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So we find that although for an ordinary person such things would be considered a great catastrophe, an incredible calamity, the most horrible thing that you can imagine. Oh, death will be coming in so many minutes. Death will be coming in 7 days. Or, here I am, a little boy, lost my mother. Or, so many problems like this. But still, these great personalities took this as a benediction from the Supreme Personality of God in order to surrender more quickly and nicely to the Supreme. This is very good. And Krishna organizes that like that. So if one sacrifices for the sake of material benediction, and of course he may be asking the demigods for all kinds of things, but when he gets them, he'll just go on asking for more. He's not satisfied with those benedictions. But if one is asking for spiritual things, then Krishna may respond by helping him lose his attachments to this material world and give him the ability to surrender more to the lotus feet of the Lord. Krishna is very merciful. You can't imagine how merciful is Krishna. How disqualified we all are, for instance, in spiritual life. I mean, by our nature. Disqualification is there. Left and right disqualification. But because of the incredible mercy of Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is called Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Name Gurtisha Namaha. He is, according to Rupa Goswami, the most magnificent manifestation of the Supreme Personality of God. It is Krishna himself, who appeared in the form of a devotee just to teach us how to surrender to the Supreme Lord. He's the most munificent incarnation of the Lord because he is delivering what no other incarnation would deliver or could deliver. That is pure love of God. The other incarnations of Krishna, when Krishna himself also appeared, you had to have already been purified in love of God. You had to already have the key to the storehouse of love of God. Previous qualification was required. Then you could take the key, open the storehouse, and take the nectar of love of God in it. But as soon as you finished, boom, it slammed again. Lock. Automatic lock. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, the Panchatattva, by chanting and dancing in ecstasy in every town and village, they just smashed open the lock on that storehouse and threw open the cover and then distributed it freely to everybody and anybody. It's not asking whether one was qualified or disqualified. Just take it. No consideration of pre-qualification. There were no prerequisites. Just take it. In this way, the Lord manifested his detachment, his giving out love of God to everybody. So we find that this love of God may be obtained by the mercy of the Lord, or it may be locked up. One may have to get the qualification. But in either case, the goal is understood. The goal is to go back home, back to God, and to develop pure love of God. Famous supreme goal of life. Supreme goal of life. Krishna is so merciful that he will arrange that we get to that supreme goal of life if we want to. If we want to, Krishna will help. But of course, I'm sure, if I start explaining about how Krishna takes everything away, then many in the audience here will be thinking, better not be so sincere that Krishna will take everything away. I don't like that. So, better I don't pray to Krishna like this. Don't worry. Krishna knows what's in your heart. He knows that if you are so much attached that you're full of fear, then He won't take away from you those things. And if Krishna does, He'll replace that fear with love. And therefore you won't mind at all. So there's nothing to worry about. In this world, everybody's fearing like anything. Aha, niju, maitum, paya. First of all, we are all eating. And by this eating process, we desire to sleep. And after sufficient rest is there, one wakes up ready to make great sex life. And after performing sex life, one becomes full of fear, because that's the nature of the material world. After all this enjoyment of sex pleasures, then one becomes full of fear by the arrangement of the Supreme. Frustration comes after such enjoyment. That brings fearfulness. And then one has to start defending himself, defending all of this arrangement of eating, sleeping, and mating against all kinds of things. So in this world, one is always victimized in this way, always full of fear. But one should have no fear in surrendering to the Supreme, because Krishna says, Mokshayashami masucha, aham tam sarva papebhyo mokshayashami. I deliver you from all of the effects of the bad reactions which come by your own karma. What are we afraid of? We're actually afraid of our own karma. When it comes right down to it, what are our fears? Well, we're afraid of getting hurt. Well, why would you get hurt? Your own karma. You're afraid of suffering with no money. Well, why would that happen? Because of your own karma. You're afraid of being defamed or of loss of position. Well, why would it happen? Because of your own karma. So one is actually afraid of his own karma, because that's what causes us to suffer. So one is afraid of himself, ultimately, afraid of what he has done, afraid of the karma he has produced. But Krishna says, aham tvam sarva papebhyo. Papa means sinful activities. So, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayashami. I take away all of your bad reactions. Masucha. This palm upwards like this means protection. You'll see deities, Lakshmi Ji is often shown like this, giving protection. Masucha, do not fear, Krishna says. If you surrender to me, I will relieve you of all the effects of your previous karma. Therefore, he will never cause you to suffer. Krishna does not cause suffering. Krishna relieves suffering. But if you have, for instance, your karma to lose everything, so Krishna will allow some of this to filter through, just so that you will surrender to him more. Often we find the case where one is in Maya, mind is off somewhere around in outer space. So Krishna will give some little slap of your karma. Actually, by your karma you should have your head cut. But Krishna just gives a little slap. That's called karma nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhaja, reducing the karma. We should have gotten so much karma. But because it is reduced practically to nil, such great reactions reduced to just small slaps on the face. But Krishna utilizes those in a very clever way, at just the right time, the right place, the right circumstance, to make one suffer so that he will surrender more to the Supreme Lord. So therefore, we find that Krishna is very merciful. How he helps us to surrender, how he causes us to give up our attachments here in this material world. So, when one is engaged in spiritual activities, then he's prepared to give up everything, because he knows Krishna will take care of it. Actually, that's a fact. You're never the loser when you surrender to Krishna. If you surrender to Krishna, give up everything for Krishna's service. And even later on you fall down from that. What have you lost? Chakra sadharaman charanam bhujam haraya pajanna pokota patet yado yidi yachakim vabajam abhudamushavai. This is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. That if one surrenders to the Lord for some time, but then gives it up later on, what has he lost? For the activities done in Krishna consciousness are eternal. You never lose the results of such activities. Whatever results of activities are there that you have done in spiritual life, by chanting or engage in devotional service, you've gotten so much advancement in spiritual life. So, that's never lost. But on the other hand, if you don't perform any of these activities, what have you gained? Even if you live a life filled with piety. All pious activities may be there, and all material perfection may be there. But if you have not engaged in Krishna's service, what have you gained? You haven't gained anything. Just another birth. Whereas if one engages in Krishna's service and even gives it up later on, whatever he's gained, he never loses. Because in this endeavor, neha brikamanasostina prachavayana vijite. There's no loss or diminution. In other words, you never lose what you gain by surrendering, and whatever you've gotten, it is never diminished by time. Every material asset is diminished by time. For instance, if you may have a lot of money or a lot of wealth, but you have to die, and then all that's lost. Even if you don't die, it generally gets taken away by the government or plunderers or taxes or fire or theft or loss or family members or whatever. If even you manage to avoid all that and you have a long duration of life, well then the material thing itself deteriorates. The thing itself doesn't stay. Even the big palace will deteriorate in due course of time. So we find that which you get by material and material means is temporary. But that which you get by serving Krishna is eternal. It's never lost. You never lose it. It stays with you lifetime after lifetime. And swapamapya dharmasya trayate mahato vayat. A little advancement on this path of devotional service saves us from the greatest fear. We no longer are lost from Krishna. We are connected. And if not this lifetime, then next lifetime, or very soon, we'll be able to attain perfection and go back home, back to God. As soon as you connect with Krishna in this way, especially if you connect with a bona fide spiritual master, then your going back home, back to Godhead is guaranteed sometime. It's like some, they may become next lifetime Babas. You know this next lifetime Baba, I explained it the other day. It means they don't want to go back to home, back to Godhead in this lifetime. So they perform devotional service for some time in this lifetime, and then later on they say, next lifetime I'll do it. Now I'm going to enjoy in the material world again. So even such rascals, we just straight out say this is nonsense. But even such rascals, next lifetime will get the chance. And they know it, they're right. But if you're so foolish as to want to take another birth and enjoy in this material world, because maybe it doesn't happen exactly next lifetime. And maybe next lifetime you also become a next lifetime Baba. and say again next lifetime. You will get the chance to serve Krishna. And this will go on until you surrender fully. You're never lost. But the risk is there that if one engages himself too much in lusty activities, he can commit offenses to great souls. Just see the example of Daksha. You've heard of the example of Daksha? Daksha is in the 4th canto, 1st volume, which you don't have yet. Terrible. So, Daksha had an arena, a sacrifice. Daksha was the best Prajapati in the universe. Prajapati means one who has sex and produces children. This is his job. That's his service. He's all day long having sex and producing children. So everybody here may be thinking, this is very nice, sir. But no, it is not the perfection of life. You simply have sex life. Even if you think this is, because it's not devotional service. Daksha, he had big troubles. Everybody thinks, oh, how nice, just have sex life, and that's devotional. But no, he had big troubles. His big troubles started when, being so much polluted by all of his attachments, he made a big sacrifice where he was just going to display himself as the greatest one. But he disrespected Lord Shiva because of all of his lusty desires. He was always frustrated in various ways. Not so bad as nowadays, but still there was frustration. So when he got tested a little bit by Lord Shiva, you see, Lord Shiva was meditating on Shankarshan, on his worshipful deity. So, meditating like that, Daksha walked into the arena. And since it was his sacrifice, everybody stood up to offer respect to Daksha, because he's a son of Lord Brahma. He's one of Lord Brahma's sons, so he's very powerful. He's no small personality. He's one of the biggest personalities in the universe. And everybody knows it. Lord Brahma was there, Lord Shiva was there, everybody was there, because you had to come if Daksha had a sacrifice. But Lord Shiva is superior to everybody. Lord Brahma is also superior, he was the father, but they came anyway. So, when Daksha walked in, Lord Shiva didn't stand up. He didn't try to avoid Daksha, he didn't try not to stand up, he didn't try to do anything. And he was meditating on Shankarshan. After all, Daksha hadn't come yet. So naturally, Lord Shiva, whenever he has some spare moment, he meditates on Lord Shankarshan. So that's what he was doing. So he wasn't even aware that Daksha had walked in the room. He didn't even know that he walked in the room. If he knew that he would walk in the room, then he would have stood up, I suppose. He didn't have to. Lord Shiva is superior. But from the external affair, Shiva and Daksha are brothers, because they're both born from Lord Brahma. So you know how brothers are. One does not accept the other as very great. This is in brotherly relationship, the way it is. So, Daksha then got very insulted that how this Lord Shiva, who's always dirty, living under a tree all the time, doesn't have any proper clothes, spreads himself with the dust of dead bodies from the crematorium, wears garlands of skulls, has a snake around his neck, and always associates with the most horrible personalities, the ghosts, the demons, the hobgoblins. So, all in all, for Daksha, who was one of these high-class fellows with more jewelry and all these things, Lord Shiva was like... The problem for Daksha was that, you see, Lord Shiva was married to his daughter, and he hated that. And he had insulted Goddess Parvati. She was at that time called Sati. And he insulted her because she was daughter. So he treated her very badly because she was married to Lord Shiva. And he thought that she was just rejected because of being married to Lord Shiva, because he thought so badly of Lord Shiva. This was his big mistake. Out of lust, he was blinded, didn't know the real position of Lord Shiva. He only saw the external thing. He didn't understand the actual position. And Sati was so insulted by all this, she committed suicide by mystic power, burned her body up right in front of Daksha, and he didn't even object. To see how hard-hearted one becomes by sex life. So much so that his own daughter was giving up her body right in front of him simply because he neglected her and he refused to even stop. Anyway, so Lord Shiva was meditating. Then Daksha started to insult Lord Shiva right in front of everybody. Well, that was too much for the associates of Lord Shiva, headed by Nandishwar, who all filled into this arena and started to curse all of the Brahmins there. But that was too much for the Brahmanas, headed by Bhrigu Muni. So then they started to counter-curse all the followers of Lord Shiva. But then it came down to a fight. But in a fight between the followers of Lord Shiva and a couple of Yajnik Brahmanas, you can know who's going to win. So what happened was the followers of Lord Shiva successfully engaged in chopping all the Brahmanas and giving them all kinds of trouble. For instance, they knocked out the teeth of some Brahmana and chapped off the mustache and hairs of another, and they were engaged in slaughtering and driving away and destroying the whole arena, passing stool and urine everywhere all over the place and defiling the whole arena. And they took Daksha and chopped his head off. And later on, Lord Shiva, out of mercy, replaced it with the head of a goat. So although having the head of a goat, he was still living, but you can imagine, having the head of a goat is not very good for your sex life. I mean, after all, it's very hard for your wife. So he had to give up that body, and then he had to take up another body, and he was again Daksha. And again, then he had so many sons, 10,000, 60,000, different forms of groups of sons. Yeah. I think they're called the Haryashvas and Pravalashvas, like this. So they were off meditating, and Narada Muni was instructing them. They went off to this place there by the Bay of Gujarat, very special place. So Narada Muni came to them and instructed them, because Daksha had asked them to go off and meditate in order they could become strong in producing children and come back and become Prajapatis themselves. And this way the whole universe would be filled up with living entities in the human form. It was very difficult to fill up the universe with human form living entities, because the universe is a big place. And if you just start with 2 or 4 human beings, it's going to take you a long time to fill up the universe. And that's exactly what happens. It takes a long time. Yeah? And therefore, the material scientists may think that evolution took place over long periods of time. It's only because it takes a long time for filling up the universe with human beings. It doesn't happen overnight. So, Daksha, being inspired by Lord Brahma's desire, was trying to figure out how to increase the progeny. So he produced a lot of sons. And then he instructed these sons, you go off and meditate for a while, perform austerities, because you cannot become a good Prajapati unless you perform austerities, and then come back and I'll set you up very nicely, and then you can go on making more prajna. But instead, Narada Muni preached to them and said, why are you wasting your time just doing austerities in order to have sex life? It's better you give up all this business and go surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and gain liberation, which is just what they did. And then another group of sons was sent by Daksha. Narada Muni did the exact same thing. This was too much for Daksha. So he started cursing Narada Muni, left and right and right and left. Just like all these fathers who are too much disturbed that their children become Krishna conscious. It's even going on today. So Daksha couldn't take it that all of his children were surrendering to Krishna. So then Daksha was cursing Narada Muni that he couldn't remain in any place for any period of time. He would never have a place as his residence for sense gratification. Because Narada Muni didn't think that was bad. Therefore he's always traveling from place to place. He can never stay anywhere very long. So Daksha again committed great offense against another great soul, Narada Muni. who's also son of Brahma. So we should understand from this that to just be engaged in this material world to accomplish one's material desires, very dangerous. Because one, even if he fulfills all unlimited amount of desires, he will be in a very dangerous condition. Therefore, if one thinks, oh, well, let me just enjoy some material desires here this lifetime. Let me just engage myself in fulfilling my desires. And next lifetime I'll surrender. That's very risky. Because you can stop this cycle of surrender that you instituted if you offend Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. And one who always engages himself in illicit sex life always manages to offend the Vaishnavas somehow or another. Because of his lust, he manages to offend Vaishnavas. Therefore, if one makes the Vaishnava aparad, offense against pure devotees, this is called hatimata, the mad elephant offense, by which one goes to hell for. He becomes very severely attacked by all kinds of maya for committing offenses against Vaishnavas. Therefore, one should never just accept that he will be able to just enjoy as he likes and then later on surrender to Krishna, because he could ruin his whole business of surrender by committing offenses. As we've seen historically, it's in the Bhagavatam, many examples like this. So this paper is finished. So we find that in general, you should not do this. Don't have this tape here next to me. It's a complete annoyance. Understand? So, if one follows Bhagavad Gita without speculating, then one can actually understand the path of surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead as He is, without much difficulty. It's not very difficult to surrender to Krishna. If one follows the path that Krishna has given us in the Bhagavad Gita, if one follows that spiritual path as the Lord has instructed in Bhagavad Gita, then there's no problem to surrender. But if one deviates from that path, or accepts some non-parampara means something which is not in the disciplic succession from Krishna, then this will cause him to have very many troubles in spiritual life. Therefore, we should only accept that path, which is the path of enlightenment given by Krishna himself, and in the parampara of Krishna himself. Then we can know for sure what is the way to advance in spiritual life, what is the way to gain real spiritual knowledge. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is really awakened by following in the footsteps of the great soul problems of existence, which are all based on our attachment to the body, to the mind, and above all, fulfilling the desires of love. Are there any questions? It's a curse which turned into a benediction. In the beginning, Indra was too much attached to the ladies, especially attached to sex life. Therefore, Brihaspati, spiritual master, cursed him that you'll have all over your body vaginas. And that was too much for Indra. After a while, it became unbearable. Then he said, my dear spiritual master, save me from this. This is horrible. So then Brihaspati said, all right, let them turn to the eyes. Therefore, now there are eyes. And therefore, he spoke to Hashaksha, 1,000 eyes. That's why it was all eyes. So the heavenly planets, you have to be very careful. Because if you are too much attached to displease your spiritual master, he has quite a bit more power there to give you something on that.
Here on this earthly planet, we can simply yell at you. Beat you on the head with a club. The Brihaspati give you all kinds of trouble. One time, Brihaspati was so disgusted with Indra that Indra was simply engaged in sex life all the time. Being king of the heavenly planets, he had a lot of facilities with him. So, he took advantage. So Brihaspati got sick of this and sent him to be a hog on the earth planet. And then Indra had to be a hog for some time. Another time, Indra was so puffed up that he didn't want to pay obeisance before Brihaspati. The Brihaspati left the assembly and so cursed all the demigods. The demons came and wiped out the demigods. Threw them out of their abode, left them running all over the universe. So even there, one disobeys the order of the spiritual masters, suffering like it. And that's really the only way the demigods will suffer. Yes. That certainly means there's something wrong, but then we have to do something to come back to the platform of Krishna consciousness. If there is some, like that weakness, or fall down even, the prayaschita, or the principle that you want to correct it, you simply go on doing it the right way. Just then take up the right path and go on. It's not that it's special. Anyway, start up again. So someday, that's not even full day. You can't do Sankirtan the whole day, there's maybe many people involved. Rarely. There may be many people involved. If you come back, that's what it is. Very much. I mean, concerned. That's enough. Next morning, after you got that strength back, run. It means that at that time, that's the official initiation, fiction, given in the Vedas. At that time, the spiritual master and the disciple contract was completed. The first initiation, more or less, the spiritual master in the first initiation, more or less, the disciple is accepting the spiritual master. And in the second initiation, more or less, the spiritual master is accepting the disciple. Although he also accepts the disciple in the first exchange, the contract. Therefore, the second initiation is much more serious than the first. The first is also serious, the second is much more serious. Therefore, we're very careful.
It is your desire that you surrender, but it is Krishna's arrangement that you are brought to spiritual master. So you have desire. You may not even know exactly. Now I want to surrender to Krishna. But Krishna will, knowing your desire better than you, bring you in the association of spiritual masters by which you can surrender. Yeah, there are names of great kings. The dynasties of moon god and sun god. Except for the one girl named Harikesa Swami. Exactly what each and every name means is not that important. But if one wants to figure out the meaning of each and every name, you need to take them to the side. activity. Nobody knows for sure the sun stays still or the sun moves, because everything moves. The earth is also not the center of the universe. First they said the earth is the center of the universe, but that's also false. It's not. And they say the sun is the center of the universe. That's also false. It's not. The center is from the pole star down to where carbon dioxide is. Pure dioxide is carbon dioxide. There's a pole. And around that everything is moving. But the earth is very near the center, so it does not move so much. And then the sun, it is going around every day once. And it's going up and down. When it goes on the upside, which it's doing right now, this is called the summer, and the day gets longer. And when it goes down on the downside, then it becomes winter, and the day gets shorter. So on June 21st, it will start going down. Now it's still going up for another 12 days. Then it will go down. So it's all relativity. You understand this? Stop one and stop the other. For instance, if you take a camera and point it to the pole star with the aperture open, and then all night long you'll see all the stars and everything make one complete circle. Well, they don't make one complete circle, they make like 3/4 or half a circle in the night. So, scientists will say that's because the earth spins. But the Bhagavatam says it's not because the earth spins, it's because the whole star framework is spinning. That's just another way of looking at it. I can't say this is a better way. It's just another way. We don't have any experience of spinning going on. We don't feel any spinning going on. The only proof they have that there's spinning going on is something called the so-called pendulum. The pendulum is left in free space. It will cover in one day, one 24-hour cycle. So this is the only proof they have that something is spinning, because it doesn't have friction like that. But we say that it's doing this because of the effect of the spin of the whole universe. The pendulum especially is affected by such energy spin. That's not the whole planet. That's the gross form. Not all form. Not all. And then one we cannot see. Same form, but it's more of it. Maybe a variable, whatever, I don't know. Like the moon, for sure. It's called form. And the situation is form, material thing. I wouldn't trust either of the things shown by NASA or whoever showed the picture. Most of them are touched up, but I don't know exactly what they're doing. But I don't trust anything they do. First of all, spiritual master, they have to return. Just bring back those foolish disciples. Or he may turn you over to somebody else's care. Finish off the job. That's also not best you discretion now. Don't make plans. Generally, turning over, this is rare case. Generally, spiritual, I just don't want to say spiritual message come back again and again. I turn it like I just do. Because they're very discouraging to me. We're not interested in coming back by the time of life. Therefore, you better go back to this life. Understand the point? Or you don't know your spiritual master. Spiritual well, you don't need spiritual. I can remember some of them, not all of them, I haven't looked up. But this one is here between the eyes, another is the temple, others are here in the back, and then there are others in the leg, in the stomach. Those are some of the places. Name of that. You just have to be angry one day and then just kill it. So all these places, also here.